What were the best nonfiction books I read in 2024? Hello, welcome to my channel. Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and this is the third of 4 videos I'm doing about the best and worst books I have read in 2024. I have already done the worst and the fiction, and now I am getting on to nonfiction. I will follow it up with rereads next week. The order I'm presenting these books in is not exact, except to get to maybe the final 4 books. And I really had to tinker with those final 4 because I tried to get those into a good order. The first 6 is just an estimation. They're all books that I liked. If you asked me to create this list on a different day, there might be a slightly different order. In order to get on this best of list, I have had to read the book for the first time in 2024. No rereads. It is also rather interesting for me to note that 8 out of the 10 books on this list were audiobooks. I tend to like my nonfiction as an audiobook. The non-audiobooks were graphic books, so those really would not have worked on audio. Moonbound, Apollo 11 and the Dream of Spaceflight by Jonathan Fetter-Vorm. How the hell did the United States get to the moon first? This is a graphic novel or graphic nonfiction book about the American spaceflight program that got Apollo 11 to the moon. It also deals with the science and technology required to get that rocket ship to the moon. So you do get some parallel stories of science and the moon flight. Science is also kind of based on people like Wernher von Braun. He was the very famous and talented German rocket scientist. And the United States brought him over to the American program because they did not want him to go to the Soviet Union. Because if he had went to the Soviet Union, the Russians may have gotten to the moon first. But you also get the story of Apollo 11. And as a graphic nonfiction work, I really rather enjoyed it. I knew the rough idea of Apollo 11, but this book sort of got my details down, or so got the details down. Really good. The Rigor of Angels, Borges, Heisenberg, Kant, and the Ultimate Nature of Reality by William Egginton. This book explores the nature of reality and how we know what we call reality, what it really is, through fiction, science, and philosophy. This book takes on 3 thinkers that are very powerful in their fields. Immanuel Kant was a philosopher that argued that space and time are mere forms of intuition that structure all our experiences. The nature of things in and of themselves are unknowable. Werner Heisenberg was a German theoretical physicist, one of the main pioneers in the theory of quantum mechanics. He was also, unfortunately, a principal scientist in the Nazi nuclear program during World War II. Not all smart people have good political sense. And then there is Jorge Luis Borges. He is the fabulous Argentinian short story writer who also did some poetry and some essays, but it's his short stories that he's mostly known for, and he also explores the nature of reality. in ways that most other writers never come close. His description of the universe is sort of like a library. And if you like short stories, you really need to explore Jorge Luis Borges. But this is a book that tried to merge that philosophy with Kant, the science of Heisenberg, and the poetry fiction of Borges. Because to understand reality, you just can't take one road of those three. You really need all three of them to kind of form a triangle of understanding, which is why I really enjoyed this book. There may be some people who only want to explore reality through science, or maybe those who only want to explore through philosophy, and those who just want the world and universe to be poetic. But bringing those three together gives us a much better understanding of how we know things. My beloved monster, Masha, the half-wild rescue cat who rescued me, by Caleb Carr. If you know my channel, you know that I love my cats. And a memoir about an author talking about his cat, well, I couldn't say no, and it did make my top 10 list. And I know that if you don't like cats, or you don't like the writing of Caleb Carr, this is not going to be a memoir for you. There's parts of these books that I really disagreed with. And it was essentially Caleb Carr's choice to let his rescue cat run free in his property in upstate New York, to be a half-wild cat. And let's just say that Masha got into some very strong and dangerous tangles with other critters in the wild. An indoor-outdoor cat usually dies young. His cat actually lived to be a very long time for an indoor-outdoor cat, and he adored her. You could just read how much he loved his cat in those pages. He was a man living alone for a variety of reasons, dealing with his own rather serious health issues. So, as a person who loves cats, I appreciated this memoir. Again, there were lots of issues that I would have disagreed with Caleb Carr on. He seemed to think that cats picked their own names. There's a chapter where he's deciding on how to name his cat Masha by throwing out random syllables until he found some that was agreeable to the cat. I don't attribute that much intelligence to a cat, even though I adore mine. If you like cats, you might like this memoir as much as I did. The Underworld, Journey to the Depths of the Ocean by Susan Casey. We know more about the moon than we know about what's on the bottom of the ocean. We have been to the moon. We really have not explored much of the bottom of the ocean. And this is the journalist Susan Casey and her love of the ocean and oceanography, and her experiences talking to the people who are trying to explore the depths of the ocean. There is a mixture of science and history and some memoir, and a really fascinating reading experience. The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs, A New History of a Lost World by Steve Brusatte. Who doesn't love dinosaurs? When I was a kid in the late 70s and early 80s, I was taught that the dinosaurs were reptiles, big, dumb, lumbering reptilian brutes. That was not good history. We've come a long way. Dinosaurs are more like birds as we understand them now. And in this book, the author says we still have dinosaurs today. They are birds. Is that an exact quote? No. Do I think that's exactly true? No. But birds are the descendants of dinosaurs. And you get to learn a lot about dinosaurs. Did you know that the fearsome Tyrannosaurus rex hunted in packs? I never heard that before. But this book will tell you a lot about what we know about the dinosaurs. Persepolis, the story of a childhood by Marjane Satrapi. This is a graphic memoir of the author's experiences as a child growing up in Iran. She was born before the Islamic Revolution of 1979, but she was just a little girl. So a lot of her formative years were in the Islamic Revolutionary regime. And this is important because it explores what life could have been like before religious fundamentalists took over, and then exploring how you live in a society ruled by the religious fundamentalists. And I found it very gripping. I am putting the first book of a duology on my top 10. I did read the second book. It did not finish as high as the first. Most publications nowadays, I think, include both books in the same volume. So if that's what you find on the bookstore or your library, just go for that. The second book, not as good as the first, but the first really hit it out of the ballpark. Ian Fleming, The Complete Man by Nicholas Shakespeare. This is, of course, the biography of Ian Fleming. Fleming is best known as the author of the James Bond novels, but he started writing those novels later in life. Earlier, he worked for the British Secret Service, and he was really a rather important secret agent during World War II. As the author, Nicholas Shakespeare, explains, if he had never written the James Bond novels, he would still be worthy of a biography. It just wouldn't have any literary references to it because he was an important spy for Britain. And then you get all that information about the James Bond novels and all the little tiny, minute details that Ian Fleming took from his own life and stuck into those novels. A very simple one was when he was a young man in his early 20s, he was dating an Austrian girl, and he met her mother. And his mother, he took the mother's name and gave it to one of his characters in one of his novels. He did things like that, just added pieces of reality. And Ian Fleming had some issues in his life. Ian Fleming was not a likable man in real life, but this biography is fantastic. Eve, How the Female Body Drove 200 Million Years of Human Evolution by Kat Bohannon. We all know that humans evolved, or we all should know that humans evolved from more primitive ancestors. But in this work of scientific history, Kat Bohannon focuses in on the human body, the female human body, and how the needs of that body and how it needed to survive pushed evolution to become what we are today. If you like science, I think this is a really essential read. I dithered back and forth over the last two books, which should have the number 2 spot and which should have the number 1 spot. I think some people are going to disagree with my choices. At number 2, I have King, A Life by Jonathan Egan. This is the biography of Martin Luther King. I knew the basics of his life. I have read other biographies and other stories that feature King in them. This is my first dedicated biography to King, and Egan tries to balance out the good parts of Martin Luther King, of which there were many, and some of the more unsavory elements of his life, which I think are important because it shows that even a great man can have his flaws, and those flaws do not necessarily distract from his greatness. A really riveting biography. For the number one spot, I picked A Fever in the Heartland, the Ku Klux Klan's plot to take over America and the woman who stopped them, by Timothy Egan. During the Roaring Twenties, the KKK was an important social organization. If you wanted to be a man of predominance, if you wanted to be a man with a successful business, if you wanted to be a man, especially one rising in politics, you needed to belong to the KKK, and you had to go along with their hatred of the blacks, hatred of the Jews, and hatred of the Catholics, and hatred of the immigrants. There was a con man, a charismatic charlatan. He was known as D.C. Stevenson, and he quickly rose to be the grand dragon of the KKK. But he was not satisfied with that position, even though that position brought wealth and power on a local level. He had national aspirations. He wanted to be a senator. And from being a senator, he wanted to become president of the United States. And really, he had a strong shot at doing that. But he was a man of hubris. He was a man who did not look fondly upon the law when the laws did not advantage him to some degree. And he grossly mistreated a woman, and she died. And that death went on to become a trial that eventually killed his career and eventually brought down the KKK. But this book is extremely important. We may not have the KKK around exactly, but we have other movements, political philosophies that spew out the same sort of hatred. And if you do not follow along with those philosophies of hate, you cannot be a man of predominance. You cannot be a man of business. You cannot be a man of politics, because you have to follow along the way the people in the 20s had to follow the KKK. But this book shows that maybe this hatred is not permanent. Maybe it will be, and history will be different from what it once was. But this book is an eye-awakening view into what our country once was, could have been, and maybe still could become. That's why it became my number one choice. Okay, those are the 10 best nonfiction books that I read in 2024. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading.